Good morning, everyone. We will give just a couple more moments for other folks to join and we'll get kicked off. All right. So we're at 11:01 and um, we've got a few folks who are trickling in. Weston, I see you're here. Welcome.
Hey, Jeremy. Good to see you.
You too.
Yeah, we can give it a minute here and then we'll go ahead and just get things kicked off.
Fantastic.
Always throws me off, Jeremy. You say it's 11. I figure I missed an hour, but that's because you're a little ahead.
You know,
That's
I,
not uncommon for you. You're always ahead of me.
I used to live in Eastern time, and it's always thrown me off here because I don't think my body ever adjusted. I still live in Eastern time, and I'm here in Central. So,
Just thankful I no longer have to work with five different time zones.
oh,
So that's
tell me
good.
about it. I know it.
Dustin, good morning. Angie, good morning to you as well. All right, Jeremy, I think we've probably got a good cohort of folks, so we'll go ahead and get things kicked off and started up for today.
Fantastic.
So, for everybody that has joined, we wanted to say thank you for attending our webinar. Today, we're going to be touching on how we can help you get set up for success as you look at 2026 from a planning perspective. My name is Weston Comfort. I am the regional VP for Sales Acceleration, and I have spent the last 15 plus years building and scaling sales organizations. I started out in the marketing technology space, worked my way into ed tech solutions, and have run and managed every type of team from the front end of business development through account executives, account management, customer success, and partnerships. So, looking forward to sharing some best practices, and hopefully, there are some takeaways that you guys can look to implement as you plan for your initiatives going into 2026. Jeremy?
Yeah, and fantastic. Thanks, Weston. Good morning, everybody. My name is Jeremy Reeves. Similar to Weston, I've had a long sales career, been in it for about 20 years, working in a various number of different industries, working along a number of different types of sales teams, whether it's residential, B2B, call center, messaging, web, you name it, I've done it. So I'm super excited to be here with you today, and we're going to talk about planning for 2026 and primarily focusing on your small and medium businesses, how you can go out there and approach the market and win in 2026. So with that, what I want to do is I'll turn this over to Weston to get us kicked off on this first section, and then we'll go from there.
Thanks, Jeremy. Yeah, so I think it's critical as we start to look at this time of year. Every sales organization and every organization for that matter is doing their planning around their next year. And it's critical for a multitude of reasons, and we've called out a few of those over on the left-hand side. Obviously, everybody's trying to figure out what we can do from a market share perspective to gain additional market share, but also as we see the onset of competitors coming into the market, we've got to change some strategy and tactics in order to combat that. If we start to look at the sales capacity and growth, given the nature and type of business that you're experiencing, obviously we want to see that the number of subscribers increase. We're going to do that through a couple of lenses, and we're going to touch on those today. So optimizing your sales process from an efficiency standpoint. And then a big one is establishing KPIs. So in order to move a number, you've got to be able to measure it. And so we'll be talking a bit about how we can do that. And then again, just building momentum and confidence within the team. Um, so I think if anybody has read The Art of War, there's a famous Sun Tzu quote that says, "Strategy without tactics is the slowest route to victory, and tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat." So none of these things are a silver bullet or standalone solutions by themselves, but more a cohesive set of strategies and strategic initiatives that, if done properly, will help you advance your sales organization. So, Jeremy, I'll turn it over to you to touch on a little bit of the trends that we're seeing in the marketplace today.
Fantastic. Thank you. And the thing that I love so much about that quote is that it goes along with another one I've also heard that is if you aim at nothing, you're going to hit it every time. So one of the things that we want to do is that we want to understand some of the trends that we're seeing going into 2026 that are happening in the SMB marketplace and be able to kind of prioritize and think about how we want to address those as we move through the webinar. So the first one that I want to touch on real quick is the technology adoption accelerate. So everybody, of course, has heard about AI. That's been kind of the big buzzword for 2025. It's kind of like the cloud a few years ago. Everybody talked about the cloud, big data. What does that necessarily mean? Well, AI is coming along, and it's not just something that's helping people write their emails and their responses to customers and to their boss. But this is actually something that people are using now to help drive efficiency in their business, to drive automation, to help them manage their businesses better. And the thing about this is that as people are adopting this, they're finding a number of different creative ways to leverage this and to help drive their business. Now, the other thing too is that along the same lines of technology adoption here is that cybersecurity is becoming a non-negotiable. You have to have it. If you've interacted with any of our teams in regards to SmartBiz, you've heard about how cybersecurity is such a huge focus and that small businesses are often targets for people who are going to do, whether it's a hacker or somebody who's not looking to do anything good with a small business there. And this is where they're going to be able to prioritize that and protect their business there. So that's ultimately what they're going to be looking from a technology standpoint. Now, the thing is of course, customers are looking to spend money on these items. A lot of the focus on the economy that we've had this past several years in terms of having a lot of inflation out there, companies are looking now to figure out how they can build out and drive additional margin. And what that's doing is that that's causing them to lean on technology to find out ways that they can become more efficient and improve their margin to get more return on investment. So you're going to see that as a trend going through 2026. But what this does is that this actually uniquely positions our broadband service provider partners. And, a lot of our small businesses that are in our towns across this country, they're looking at our BSPs as partners and wondering how they can help them. So, in the past, it's probably traditionally been looked at like, hey, we want to have fast, reliable internet. But the fact is that with all of these different pieces of technology that are coming into play, they're looking for somebody who's more of a strategic partner. And because of that, value-based selling is going to win the day. And they're looking for somebody who could come along, show the value to them, help them see just past connectivity and being able to actually manage their business more effectively. So with that, it's important to kind of understand these trends here, but then also how we can apply that and understand what our businesses look like in our markets, and then also be able to address them from there.
Yeah, Jeremy, I think those are great points. As we start seeing the landscape changing, it's important to call out some of those key details. And I think you touched on it with the first point in there. Cybersecurity is no longer a nice to have. It's table stakes. It's a must have, and our subscribers and your subscribers are expecting the highest level of service to protect their small businesses from any form of cyber attack. And I didn't mention this at the top of the session, so I just wanted to take a brief second to do that. If you guys have questions throughout this, please drop those in the chat. I'll be monitoring that. We'll have a Q&A at the end, but this will be a good way to have kind of a running tally of questions that are in here. And if we don't get to them in the Q&A, we can obviously respond to them in chat and then send a follow-up out to you folks. But as Jeremy alluded to, the next thing that we want to look at once we've identified those trends is really to analyze our market. And we can help our customers do this through our sales acceleration process by identifying what your total addressable market is based on zip code analysis. So this really helps you understand and aggregate the business opportunities in your area and then plan a strategy for capturing market share in those specific industry verticals. So Jeremy will touch on that a little bit more in this next slide.
Yeah, and thank you. So where we're looking at this is to really understand what businesses are in our area, understand some of the demographics about them, like how much revenue do they generate on an annual basis, and then also about how many employees they may have working for them. Once we understand this, this gives us some additional insights that allows us to be able to go out and approach the market in an efficient and an effective way. So in this particular section, what we're going to talk about today is starting with that market analysis, developing an ideal client profile, and then being able to plan like how many resources do we need to put in play to be able to go out there and effectively sell to this particular market. So when we think about this, we start off and we understand exactly, what businesses are in our area. And the reason why you want to do this is because this allows you to plan more effectively. So if you can identify, for example, the most dominant industries that are in your area, this allows you to plan your year more effectively. So in this example, what we're seeing is that healthcare and social assistance is really prominent in this particular area. And we can see construction, retail, trade, other services, all that kind of stuff follows. So if we were to look at this, we would want to make sure that we're planning around some of the cyclical nature of these particular industries. So let's take retail trade, for example. We know that retail is going to, of course, be very busy in Q4. We'd love to think that they're going to be busy year round, but if we know that they're going to be busy in Q4, they're probably going to want to ramp up and make sure that they have things in place in Q3, right? As they're getting ready to go into the busy holiday season. So that may be the time that we actually reach out. Well, for us in our forecasting, from a forecasting standpoint, we want to attribute our sales and what we're going to do in Q3, knowing that that's going to be a busy time for them. Now, it's one thing to know when they're going to be busy, but we also want to tailor our value propositions to this. We'll talk about this in a little bit more detail in a few moments, but we want to make sure that we're focusing our efforts on where there's really the most of opportunities in our markets. So that's not to say that we won't have a value prop for our real estate and rental teams that are down here at the bottom, but we're definitely going to have something in place for our healthcare, construction, and retail trade folks. This also allows us to do some consultative selling. So it's allowing us to know our customers better, but then think about it from another angle as well. And that's being able to get involved in your area. So if you have like local retail groups, or if you have a chamber, getting involved with them and understanding what their needs are, this allows you to be able to work in with those groups and to approach those folks better. And then the market segmentation, the competitive differentiation. So you're able to prioritize those higher value verticals to be able to go in there and take a more smarter, more efficient approach. But when you're doing that as well, too, is that you're able to understand how you can separate yourself from your competitors. being able to show what your value is and how you're different from somebody else who's in the area and how you can solve your customers' needs there. So what we'll do is that we'll kind of take that and we'll talk about how we can evaluate this footprint and the opportunity and break that down into an ideal client profile.
Yeah, Jeremy, I think it's critical as we look at leveraging firmographic, demographic information to break down those industry verticals into an ideal customer profile. The reason that we do this is twofold. One, it provides some insight back to marketing from an air coverage standpoint so that we have a holistic strategy as an organization to go after those segments. Marketing historically is our nurture element of our business. So they're going to warm those leads up. Our brand is going to be in front of them. We're going to make sure that those value-based offers are present. And then from an internal sales lens, by identifying those ideal customer profiles, we can start to really fine tune what are the things that they care about? What are the pain points that within that industry vertical we know that a retail business such as a small coffee shop might run into? So that's critical because then when you mention value proposition, we can really start to tailor our pitch and our message that to the couple, maybe two, 3 points that's really going to resonate with that audience. The other thing that it allows you to do is once you've broken down those verticals by industry, you can now take the value propositions and start to get a lot more strategic in your planning for canvassing those areas. So as you're building your call list and you're saying, I'm going to go after retail today, you can call down your list of retail customers because you now know what are their pain points and what are my value propositions that are going to resonate with that audience. And you can do that in sequence so that you're not jumping from one industry segment to another and trying to retain all of that information in your head.
That's a great point. And I know that we've talked about it previously in other sessions, but the ability to do that is so critical, right? It allows you to just work a plan and have a process in place. So having that ideal client profile and having the air cover from a marketing standpoint, it just makes your life easier, right? So to kind of give you an example about what this would look like for a smart biz customer, where we start off with is really the demographics. And we think about it from the industries or segments. We use that target market analysis that we used earlier to kind of really tell us like where we should focus our efforts. So in this example, we're looking at retail, hospitality, professional services, personal services, light industry in this case. Now, from a SmartBiz perspective, we're typically looking at that 20, 30 employee size business and below. Those are the folks who are really going to be very well serviced by a product like SmartBiz. Has that cybersecurity element. It gives them some of those big value benefits like the four separated networks, for example, the ability to have a customer dedicated portal. But what we're also going to do is that we're also going to take a look at the geography. So in this particular example, we're calling out the greater Portland area. And, when I think about this is like, really, where do you want to focus your time? So if we know where a bunch of retailers are, back to your example, Weston, where you're saying like, hey, we've got a list, this makes our day more efficient. So we can plan our day better, we can plan our week better and our outreach to where then if we're in an area, we're not having to travel the entire countryside and kind of jumping around from different segment to others, right? This just allows us to become more efficient. But then also we can do some work to understand who the decision maker in these businesses are. This allows us to do a little bit of legwork, whether it's us calling ahead to set up an appointment, doing some work inside of a CRM to determine exactly who the business owner or that manager may be. But this allows us to be able to focus our efforts and understand what may be some of the solutions we can provide. Now, talking about solutions for just a second, we also want to identify these pain points that are amongst these customers. So, I think just small businesses in general, they're oftentimes going to have minimal IT resources. And, just by nature, that's going to mean that oftentimes they will take like a residential offering or something very small. But this is where you can kind of come in and be able to support them from that aspect and being able to offer something like SmartBiz to help them. But oftentimes they're going to have competing priorities. A baker is a baker. And when I think about it from a local bakery or even the local brewery, that's where I like to spend most of my time at around here. They're wanting to focus on what they do. And, in the case of a baker, they're wanting to bake cookies, bake cakes, they're wanting to serve their customers. And oftentimes they're not thinking about what they need to do from an IT standpoint. Oftentimes, because they're small, they don't have the resources inside the business that can really focus on spending time on how to really optimize their IT. So, they're oftentimes strapped for time. They're working hard. And they're oftentimes, because of that, they're not aware of cybersecurity risk and PCI compliance. We touched on it very briefly at the very beginning about the cybersecurity risk, but oftentimes a lot of small businesses they think, well, why would anybody come and attack us? Like, why would anybody try to launch ransomware on our business? Well, the thing is that the reason why they focus on small businesses is because they have minimal IT resources and they're kind of counting on that. But they know that they've got some cash on hand. So, oftentimes you may see on in the news like these big ransomware attacks of like, $600,000, $1 million, for these big companies. But oftentimes these are happening every day and they're happening for like $6,000 and $10,000 down on our small and medium business customers. So we really want to make sure that we're protecting them from that angle. Now, the other thing too, PCI compliance, a lot of folks don't realize it, but if you're going to be taking those mobile payments, you're going to be taking credit cards, you want to make sure that you're compliant there, especially from either a security, an insurance standpoint, or just from the ability to have that point of sale system. So once we understand these pain points, we're able to then make our offers towards these customers. And as we're thinking about the marketing materials and understanding what's going to be important to them, we can start tailoring and putting our messaging towards these things. So, like for example, having a POS system, having that dedicated network for that, putting your staff on a separate network from a PCI compliance standpoint, offering your guests their own dedicated Wi-Fi instead of having them on the same network as your point of sale. All these types of things, they really help your customer when they're looking to purchase a solution. And this is where you can come into play and educate them. So being able to plan and think about how you want to talk about this with your customer is very crucial. So what we'll do is that we'll show you just a quick example of what this would look like for a retail establishment. So, we talked about this a little bit with the TAM analysis and, the different verticals and industries that are in your particular area. But, in a TAM analysis that we can help you pull with our program, we're also going to give you an idea about the annual revenue and then how many businesses are going to be in that sweet spot, 20 to 30 employees and below. And what you're going to find in most of your areas is that that's the vast majority of businesses. So it's really about a matter of tailoring your messaging to them. So if you're a retailer in this particular example, you're going to want to look at how you can safeguard your business, just making sure that your point of sale is secure. But then also, how can you interact with your customers? So customers who will go into a retail establishment, if you provide a Wi-Fi, they typically stay longer, meaning that they shop longer and that they spend more money. So that's ultimately what we're trying to do is to help them protect their business, but then also grow their business here as well. So we've talked a lot about this. Maybe we should also talk a little bit about when it's time to kind of think about your sales coverage, when it's time to hire, and making sure you have the resources that you need in place to be able to go out and approach the market.
Yeah, Jeremy, and as we're thinking about making that transition, I'm going to share a brief personal story. So I owned and operated a CrossFit gym for 5 years, and like many small business owners, no clue about a lot of these cyber threats, the need from a PCI compliance standpoint to be able to protect people's credit card information if they were doing point of sale, buying post-workout type of supplements or even apparel inside of the gym. And we had a residential plan, which I'm sure many of you who are broadband providers have a cohort of folks that are out there that have the same level of service. And so I think it's critical just from an education standpoint for these small businesses. They think speed to market is the big thing. So internet is internet. It's a dumb pipe. Let's go in. Let's bring in an ability to have wireless coverage and maybe potentially a branded portal for somebody to be able to better recognize our brand. But I think the points you made are extremely relevant and critical for us from an education lens as we look at how do we better prepare our customers for some of the risks that are out there and provide them with the information that's viable for them to operate their business safely. But again, I think one of the things you touched on is once we really understand who we have in our footprint, then we need to talk about what we look at from a strategic lens as far as sales coverage. So what we're going to talk about in this is when we talk about coverage, we have to start at the higher level of what is the strategic goal? What is the thing that we're trying to achieve in this next year? And that's where all of this conversation starts from because we need to know, is it a revenue growth percentage of, say, 10% year over year growth? Is it a customer experience in, say, a co-op with developing or improving upon our NPS score? Is it reinvesting some of that revenue into technology and innovation around AI? Any and all of those things can be great, relevant targets for your business. But what those do is they help to inform future conversations around performance management, hiring needs, compensation modeling. And that's really where we get into coverage models to figure out, do we have the right mix and personnel to be able to go and deliver on our strategic targets within that year? If we do, great. Maybe we're being conservative. And if we over-index, then we have the opportunity to go out and hire. Or for another example, maybe we were lucky enough to bring in some BEAD funding, and the plan for next year is to be able to go and expand fiber into a new market. That's a different sales lens than maybe some of the folks who are in an inbound call center. And maybe you want to look at adding and developing an outbound sales motion for your B2B folks. So again, lots of different pieces of that conversation we can help with. But I know, Jeremy, you're going to jump in to kind of the deeper nuances of that in this next section.
Yeah, and we touched on it before with talking about kind of the TAM, understanding your ideal client profile and the penetration rate. And I think that that's probably where most businesses start and most BSPs start, and that's where you should go. However, as you get into your business a little bit deeper and you start managing your teams, you also have to kind of look at other considerations as well too. So what we'll do is we'll kind of start off with the salesperson workload metrics, and really this is going to be kind of some of the determining factors on how you expand and scale your teams. So when we think about the salesperson workload metrics, we're thinking about accounts per rep. So many of us, of course, have had jobs where it's not only important just to go out and get new business, but it's also to think about how we renew and upsell our current customers as well too. So when we think about what time it takes and to effectively help and manage those particular accounts, we need to take that into consideration for a salesperson because ultimately what we're doing is we're wanting to think about the customer experience because when the customer has a great experience, they'll spend more. And we need to think about how we nurture those particular relationships and grow that out. Now, the other thing too is territory size and density. These will also play a factor as well too. How well can you get out to your customers, and how well and how often can you see them? These will have an impact on things like your activity and performance metrics. So, how many times can you see them? How many times can you reach out to them? Those are going to be key points in making sure that the customers are happy. But then also when we think about this, we want to ensure that we're able to reach out to all of our customers. So in the next slide, we're going to give you an example of coverage, but we need to think about pipeline coverage, meaning if we set a target for the year of getting 300 customers in, we have two people. Okay, is that enough necessarily for us to reach and get all 300 of those customers? Or should we hire on a third salesperson and actually make that to where they're getting 100 each? So we'll talk about that in just a moment. But then also some of the financial metrics here, a revenue per rep target, and this is a little bit of a balancing act here, right? So if you have one person who's in there, they're very hungry, and they're trying to get to their revenue targets, oftentimes what they're going to be doing if their market's too big, if it's too much for them to handle, they're just going to go out there and close the fastest things that they can, right? Which means that oftentimes you may not get a quality sale in which you could have gotten additional features or different programs into the sale. but also longer term that may have an impact on whether the customer stays as well too. Because like if they are, on a low end package, you may not necessarily be meeting their needs, and somebody comes along and does that value based sell, they may actually end up winning that customer. So this is a way that we can kind of think about that from that standpoint: is how are we best setting up our reps for success to support our customers? And that's ultimately what we're looking to do. Now, the one that's down here on the bottom in that section, that customer acquisition cost, is one that I know that everybody looks at. We've got to take a look at our CAC and think about what does it take to acquire a customer. But this is one thing here that, as we're looking at thinking about upselling customers, getting them into higher rate plans, additional features on their account, this is a great way to kind of think about how we're looking to do that. And then the last piece here is, of course, your strategic indicators. You think about your growth goals over not just this year, but over the next 3, 5 years, considering that and being able to plan ahead. So the more that we can actually kind of dive in and understand our metrics, this allows us to plan better for those, sales in the next several years versus just focusing on what's directly in front of us at that time. So, like as I promised just a minute ago, we would talk a little bit of a conversion example about capacity here. And the thing about this is that we think about the total addressable market. And if we were going to kind of size this up and call it an obtainable market, this is where we take our ideal client profile. We say, of these 2,000 businesses that are in our area, how many of these would really be great candidates for us to be able to go out and sell? So in this case, we have 1,200 businesses that we see that are out there. Now, in the last example where I mentioned if you have 2 or do you need 3, you have to think about how many sales that they would be ideally able to get on a monthly basis. So if we say that we want to get 25% penetration of that 1,200, that's 300 businesses. And what that equates out to is about 100 sales target per rep on an annual basis. So if we break that down again to the monthly here, we're looking at about 8 to 9 per month. Now that's perfectly reasonable, right? That allows them to be able to do their research, to approach the customer, find out who the decision maker is, uncover their challenges, be able to position the product well. And in that instance, you're more likely to also get a higher quality sale. What I mean by that is that you're usually not looking at just kind of your base plan. You're looking at that second, third tier offering that you have out there, additional features. Maybe that's phones, maybe that's security in addition to SmartBiz. That whole idea here is that you're not leaving money on the table, and you're servicing your customers. You're providing them that value that's so important for them. Now, the thing that I want to call out here real quick, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in the forecasting aspect of this, is validating it with historical data. If you have historical data, if you've been capturing data and saying, what has been our sales history here, this will be very helpful in being able to inform your sales process and then also your sales forecasting. So with that in mind, let's talk a little bit about what the sales process actually looks like and why it's so important for our customers to be able to have one in place.
Yeah, Jeremy, I think the slide 2 prior on the coverage metrics is extremely important to maybe touch on in a little bit more detail. When we're talking about those coverage metrics, a lot of you may be saying, shoot, I don't know how to measure those today, or maybe we don't have the data inside of our business to be able to make a data-driven, informed decision. And that's completely understandable and one of the earlier stages in progression. And so as we look at measuring numbers in order to move them, this is where we start to evaluate that. This is really where it starts to all come together, and the basis and foundation for a data-driven business is the design of your sales process. And this is what will help drive an effective sales team, because it allows you to get away from managing in a vacuum with subjective feedback, and really get into a clear process with key milestones and steps that allow you to manage rep performance, proactively identify areas where coaching is needed, and then just really gain visibility into the key performance indicators that'll help you lead to scaling and winning within your business. And so I think this next section is critical, and we'll build on that slide that was done 2 prior, Jeremy. But I wanted to make sure that we called that out, that that's not uncommon to not have all of the metrics in place. But as your business grows and matures, we see a need to start moving away from subjective conversation. The next phase is some tracking and say spreadsheets and data that's housed in silos. And then we start to see kind of that next phase of crawl, walk, run, where someone integrates with a CRM and they're able to manage all of that effectively at scale and have some automation to inform some of those future decisions.
That's right. And, the sales process, quite honestly, is a game changer. Just like you were talking about, where this puts some of the rigor behind it to where you can track things better. You understand where everything is, right? I can tell you, I've worked at an organization previously where we started out, we did not have a sales process in place. And the quality of conversations that we were having and trying to track where we were and where we were going for the year were terrible. It's always like, hey, you spoke with this customer the other day. How are things going? Oh, it's fantastic. Well, when do you think they'll close? I have no idea. Those are the types of conversations that you'll run into when you don't have a sales process.
Yeah, Jeremy, I
However,
think the I thinks, I feels, I wants are the statements
yeah,
that you hear from your sales team when you don't have the rigor around a process for them to follow.
that's right. That's exactly right. So what we're going to do is that we're going to change all those to I knows, and we're going to help folks go through that. But the sales benefits or the benefits of the sales process rather, they really benefit everybody involved in the transaction. So, from your customers, because you have an aligned process that allows you to go through and methodically uncover what their challenges are, what their needs are. And through that, you'll build better relationships. So your customer, they feel that they are heard and that they're understood, and by building those better relationships, they're going to trust you to offer better programs and better services to them that allow them to purchase more and be happier. But then for your employees as well, too, it allows for consistency. If any of you who are on the call today have ever played sports or done anything that you have interest in, whether it's some kind of games or anything like that, you know that anything worth doing is worth doing well. And having the ability to go in and have a repeatable process is going to allow your people to get not only more proficient in that process, but they become better in terms of how they work in terms of this and uncovering the needs. So we talked about like having those different industries and being able to tailor our messaging towards them. This is where that practice comes into place. They'll get better at their sales process, and that you'll find that you're serving your customers better. But then also, this gives you the opportunity to align your compensation as well for those employees. So, what we're looking to do, and we'll talk about some of the metrics in just a few moments. This allows you to align that to where you're driving the behaviors that you want to see of your employees and being able to be more effective in how they interact with your customers. Now, of course, I'd be totally remiss if I didn't cover the main benefit to a BSP. So if we have leaders who are on the call today, of course, what you're looking at is what does this mean to me in terms of my top line growth? Well, this, of course, will mean higher revenue. But then also on the operational efficiency side, this also drives that bottom line. It'll also help keep that low as well too. So you're going to optimize your margin by having a good process in place to be able to share across your organization and ultimately have your sales team running there. Now, we have an example of a sales process here along the bottom. It's a very common one. If you go out and Google sales process for B2B, you're going to see that this is common. But the reason why it's common is because it works so well. So many different organizations actually do this. This is actually the one we use here at Calix, for example. And what you can do is what Weston was alluding to earlier is that by having that sales process in place, this is the foundation of your funnel, which we'll show you in just a few slides what this looks like. But this allows you to track where different customers are through different stages. So, if you've identified a customer, have you reached out to them and qualified them yet? Have you made a proposal for them? Are you negotiating pricing or additional different details about the contract that you need to have in place for them? Okay, great. They're agreeing now to become a customer. They're ready to go ahead and sign up and get installed. So you're committing it. And now close one. This is where we have won the business. Now we're going out and implementing everything that we have agreed to in the contract. So that's really what we're looking at from a sales process here is that it's very simple. Now, the thing is too, is that we work with a number of different BSPs and they may have some semblance of this, but what they've also done is that they've uh, um, customized, I was about to say qualified, but customize this to meet their needs. So, for example, if at a certain stage you say, well, this needs to go over to this particular team because they need to do something with the contract, that's totally fine. You can put that in here to where it aligns to your business needs and make sure that you're servicing your customers much better and according to what your business needs to do. Now, when we think about some of the best practices for designing the sales process, we talked about just a moment ago about building that repeatable framework. But once you continue to repeat upon it, you get better at it. You'll find that your sales reps they learn what to uncover with a customer. They learn how to work inside the organization better. It just makes it so much more efficient. It makes it so much easier for folks to be able to work with. You align with your goals and your forecasting. So this is where you're able to now start getting insights into how long it takes a deal to close. And then you're able to take that and then to see exactly where a customer is in that pipeline, and then what your sales reps need to do alongside that to be able to move the customer through. But then that also takes you to a point to where you can say, okay, if we have a 90-day sales cycle for a customer, then we're able to say, okay, well, in Q1, this is how many customers that we expect to close. Do we have enough customers in our pipeline? Okay, we need to go and actually talk to a few more. Fantastic, add those in. And then you can do that again for Q2, Q3, and Q4. So this gives you that structured process to be able to improve your forecasting there. This also gives you data and analytics. So, as Weston was talking about before, it's not uncommon right now for folks who haven't necessarily got either a CRM or done any tracking to not have any data. And as you kind of go into this, it is a crawl, walk, run approach. This allows you to track some of those KPIs. So you're now able to develop those numbers and to be able to get those insights here that makes it much better and more efficient for you. So we hit on the efficiency piece just briefly a minute ago, but then also this enables your personal development. People come to work not only to make money, but they also want to grow with the organization. This allows you to coach your team better and help them to develop and to help them develop those skills and become better salespeople and ultimately serve your customers better. But then also incorporate proven tactics. Best practices are a great way to be able to share across the team. Once you're able to kind of get that high level view of your entire process and where customers are along in that process, it allows you to be able to find bottlenecks where you can resolve those, and also share those best practices across the board that allows you to service your customers better as well too. So Weston, I know that we've talked a bit about the process here, but as we kind of take this and then we flip that sales process up on its end and create a funnel, this kind of gets into really kind of what we were setting up this webinar for.
Yeah, for sure. And I think Jeremy, you made some great points, and I'd be remiss if I didn't call this one out. I managed a residential sales team for a broadband provider in Montana and Wyoming, Colorado, for about 5 years. The biggest difference in the residential sales game versus the small business is that the residential conversations are transactional. It's a one call close. It's a knock on a door. The decision maker is standing behind that door, and your goal is high velocity and to make sure that you've got enough volume in your funnel to convert those. And so the process that you just laid out isn't necessarily applicable for residential. So for those of our customers who are making the transition from being maybe solely focused in residential and adding in the elements of going after commercial or B2B, these are some of the critical nuances that are really important to understand if you're going to be set up for success going into next year. So I think you hit the nail on the head, Jeremy. What we take is we take that sales process that's kind of more left to right, where we're moving things from stage to stage, and we flip it up on its head. And you touched on one thing which is critical. You called out, for instance, a 90-day sales cycle. Well, that tells us that every quarter we need to have at least probably 3x coverage in the top of our funnel in order to make sure that those transition through. And what I mean by 3x, Jeremy's going to touch on, is you can start to mathematically understand what does my individual sales business need in order to deliver on my individual goal, as a sales leader, what does my team need to have from an opportunity in the identify stage in order to deliver on our end result that we need for a quota at the end of a measured period, which could be a month, a quarter, or annually. So we'll go ahead and touch on that, Jeremy, and I'll kick it over to you. But again, I think what we're trying to convey in here is that with this data, you can now have confidence and accuracy in your sales number, because you then have to use that to report back to your executive teams and your boards of directors.
And that's so true because, when you actually know where you're going, then you can course correct throughout the year, right? And having that coverage at the very top end, the 3X there, it allows you to back into your number. So if you get down to the end here and you say, okay, well, we actually needed more customers, this allows you to plan better and to, of course, partner with marketing to get more customers in the top end of the funnel. But the main thing here too is why is it so important to have this approach? Well, because it helps you hit your target. That's the number one reason, right? And when you have this ability to plan, and you know where you're at, you can course correct and adjust throughout. The other thing too is that when you're managing your time and you've got this forecast to be able to help you do that, it allows you to just manage your business and manage your day better. And you'll find that you're able to do the actions and take the necessary steps versus doing a bunch of erroneous stuff that may or may not help you hit your goal. It helps you there. But then also when we talk about your sales and corporate planning, so the thing here, a lot of businesses are getting to this point in the year and they're doing two things. Number one, they're analyzing 2025. And hopefully many of them are at a point to where they're saying, okay, we're here on the final stretch here in December. We're this close to hitting our goal. We're going to hit our goal. We're going to be above it or they're above it. However, there are a bunch of folks who are also going to be out there who are nowhere close right now. And they're going to be looking at 2026 thinking, okay, how do we make sure that we're not missing our goal in 2026? And what are the things that we need to do to put in place to do that? The sales forecast enables you to be able to do that. So your corporate planning. The other thing too, if you're a finance person or accounting person here on the call, is that you're probably knee deep in that right now and assessing 2025 and getting ready to do 2026. But you're probably looking at your sales and marketing teams thinking about what can you do? What can you output in 2026? How can we help you? And it helps you in being able to allocate those resources and understanding whether it's more marketing spend, we need to get additional resources and think about we need more headcount, or we may need to invest in our own technology with a CRM, whatever it may be. But this allows you from a corporate planning standpoint to invest your money in the right places and at the right times to make sure that you are hitting your targets as you're going through next year. Now, let's talk about some of the KPIs that should go into this as well too, because as you're looking at and planning out, you want to make sure that you're measuring some key pieces and components of this. Now, many of you have probably heard of the SMART goal framework. If you haven't, it's very common. It's basically kind of the outline of making a strong goal or target. And that is to say that a target should be specific, it should be measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. So, we give you some examples here on the side of those to where it says like, specific. Well, we want to increase our sales revenue by 15% this year. So you may have some folks who actually do year over year growth versus instead of having an annual plan target. And that's okay because you can take a look at your previous year and say exactly where you need to be. Vice versa, you can still do it from an annual plan standpoint. But you can also say, what are those metrics? Like, what are we going to determine that is going to help us reach that target? So in this case, you may be familiar with ARPU, monthly recurring revenue. But what are some of those activity metrics that need to happen to drive some of those results metrics? We'll talk about that in just a second. Are they achievable? Can you hit these numbers? Do you have all the resources in place? Are they realistic? I would love to sit here and say that you can go from zero to $1 million in revenue like that. And you may be able to given your market, but you need to size that up and have a plan on how you're going to get there. It's not just one thing that, some of these things where we hear about people like they kind of just have growth overnight. That's not very common. A lot of times it takes planning and it takes the objectives and the tactics to be able to go out and hit that to effectively go out there and reach that target. Has to be relevant. Doesn't align to your business priorities. BSPs, we're in the business of providing connectivity, making sure that customers can access the internet, that they have services, smart services to be able to support their customers better. A lot of times we're not selling cupcakes, right? So we need to make sure that our goals that they align to that and ultimately they help support our objectives. And then they're time bound. So, when you're setting out a goal, it's one thing to say we want to do it in 2026, but when in 2026 do you want to do it? Does hitting a particular objective then trigger another objective? And do you need to have that first one done by Q1? Does it need to be done in February? Could it wait until April, May? You would have to determine that and to see exactly where it needs to be,
Well,
right?
and Jeremy, I think as we're talking about this for the context of planning in 2026, the other thing to take into consideration are core dependencies. So if you're setting KPIs, this is not an exercise for just sales to be done in a vacuum. We
Right.
mentioned marketing providing air cover earlier in this conversation. But again, as we're thinking through planning, obviously there's departmental planning, but those roll up to the overall strategic priorities of the business. And so we've got to take into consideration what are some of the core dependencies that we're relying upon. And so if your teams were running a big event mid-year, there might be a push to go and promote that event, and that there's a lot of resources that are tied up in that. And so you have to take that into consideration for the cyclicality of the business, because there's definitely trends as you look at seasonality. And so when we're talking historical data informing your goal setting, those are things when we look at the reasonable and achievable that you want to take into consideration. And then obviously time bound has a factor in that as well. But I thought it'd be important to call that out because these are things that are not just dependent on you as the sales leader.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing too is that when taking these SMART goals is determining if they're activity based or if they're results based. And there's a few examples over here. I'm not going to read off each individual one, but a couple of examples of activity based ones would be, of course, sales activity. How many small, medium businesses did you reach out to this week? How many did you visit? And then, the customer engagement here. How many did you actually demo the product to? Now, things of like the results metrics are going to be your conversion metrics, revenue goals, that sort of thing there. And this is where you're going to be able to tie those activity metrics. So if they're done right, they'll drive the results. And that's ultimately what we're trying to do there. So this will help in terms of determining what do your sales reps need to do to get the results that you need. Now, let's take a look at some guidance for forecasting accuracy real quick, and then we're going to jump into our Q&A. But the first thing here is use data-driven methods. Wherever you have it available, take that historical data, take those pipeline trends and those market signals, and take those and let that help you drive your forecasting. If nothing else, you can test and check against what you're looking at from a standpoint of making sure that your forecast is accurate and that you're moving along at the right pace. The second thing is ensure your data quality. So, if you have a CRM, become maniacal about it being clean and making sure that the data in there is accurate, especially if you work across a number of folks who are on a team who may work with a customer in different capacities. It's important to make sure that we're tracking what is what with the customer and that you're making sure that you have the right opportunities in there at a specific time. Now, implement structured review cycles. We have in here, there's a stat that says weekly forecast reviews improve accuracy by 31%. The main thing here is to talk about it. It's one thing to do your forecast and to set it and then kind of forget it, because what that means is that you're not going to be checking in on it and then making sure that you're progressing towards your goal. If you're actually having these weekly conversations, you're likely to hit your goal because you're going to be looking at where you're at with your customers and how you can better plan to service them. Adopt technology. So I know a lot of customers that we work with today, they may or may not have a CRM, and they may not have some type of BI tool available to them, whether that's like Power BI or some sort to get some different insights. If you have the ability to do it, leverage AI, leverage some of those models to where you can be able to get those different insights into your business. Because there's going to be some things that I'm guaranteeing you that you'll look into it and it'll surprise you, and it'll allow you to course correct and to be able to go out and hit your number. And we talked about the weekly forecast just a moment ago, but then track early. So as we were taking a look at those different stages and we showed how that fit into the forecast model, being able to track early is going to also lead to success. So making sure that if you're looking at a quarterly forecast there, like where are you at in week two? Where are you at in week three? Make sure you're diligent and on top of that from that standpoint. Weston, what else would you add here from a forecasting best practice and kind of guidance standpoint on
Yeah, I
this?
mean, I think the thing that you talked about with review cycles, not only is that critical for course correcting within your goal setting exercise, but I think it's critical from a performance management standpoint. So, transparency breeds consistency. So, if we are able to go and have those dedicated conversations in our one-on-ones and our performance reviews, those are things that elevate performance on your team at an individual and a team-based level. So, I think that's one thing. And I think making it common language to evaluate your sales targets, not from the exercise of it being a finger pointing game, but from a coaching and development standpoint of saying, all right, if we are behind, what are the reasons why? Do we have maybe one of our peers that is doing well? What are they doing differently? So again, it allows you to do some analysis inside of that to better understand the root cause. So that'd be the only thing that I would add in there, Jeremy. I think the rest of it you hit the nail on the head.
Awesome. Awesome.
So yeah, I
So,
think Jeremy, if you want to flip to the next, we've got about 5 minutes in here. I didn't
yeah,
know if there were any questions. I didn't see any in the chat that we missed, but if there's anybody that has a question, feel free to drop it in chat or come off mute, and you can ask that of us in here. Happy to chat through it. No worries. If there's no questions, that's completely fine. Oh, Dustin's got one. Go ahead, Dustin. He might be typing it in. Dustin, if you're trying to speak, I'm not hearing you. Talk about assigning location versus having an
oh,
open knock. So, um, no, you're all good. Don't worry. It's probably a restriction of Zoom right now. This is actually a conversation that Dustin and I had with Jeremy previously about assigning locations versus just going out and openly knocking a specific area. So, when I managed the residential sales team, we would assign a subset of leads. And what that did was it allowed you on a monthly basis to strategize where in your footprint you were going to put your reps and your team. It would allow you to track that effectively so you knew that you were canvassing your entire footprint in a strategic and a systematic manner, but it allowed the individual sales rep to really be the CEO of their own business. They could go and analyze their subset of leads. And similar to kind of the call prioritization based on verticals and ICP, I could set up my day so that I'm going out and hitting retail businesses. And then I'd be going out the following day and focusing maybe on manufacturing and health sciences. Um, what that does is it provides you a systematic approach to your footprint so you can move that team from one area to another. You can then start to analyze trends. We're successful in seasonality, maybe in one specific area, where you might have a demographic that's different than another area. So those things start to inform how you assign those leads. And then the next thing that it does is it ensures that from month to month, you reassign them a new subset of leads. So you're getting coverage across your entire footprint so that you're not just randomly going to maybe the new build area and taking the low-hanging fruit. But if one of your goals is to increase penetration in an area that might be a well-built out area with competition, that's a way that you get to go out and canvas that. But you can think strategically around balancing the two because you could make a mix of maybe a focus area for increasing penetration and add in 15, 20, 30% in a new build area that you know someone's going to have success, so you can kind of balance that effort out. So I hope
Yeah,
that
having
answers
a
your question, Dustin.
Yeah, and I love the focused approach about it, especially if you manage a door-to-door team that has a number of different employees there, because this allows you to become more focused, right? And you don't wear out a specific area by just consistently sending people in there. It allows them to focus in different areas and then come back to customers as well too. So
That
it's such a
callback's the
better
critical
approach.
piece, Jeremy, I think, because when we're talking B2B, a lot of times it's not a one conversation close.
Right.
And if we warmed up that lead and we're randomly just going through our footprint and we've got say 1,000 different addresses that we can go through, we would think about that in making sure that we circle back. So,
Yeah.
and I see Dustin, your comment in there, do residential and business for both reps. So there's a mix of that works well for you guys. And I think Jeremy, you mentioned the door to door. It works great in a call center environment as well.
Yeah.
You just think about it instead of knocking a door, but dialing for that individual.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, I
Hey,
know we're at time here, Jeremy, so I wanted to maybe just click briefly into kind of the last slide. We have a couple success stories in here that we'll share out to you guys. But if you're interested in engaging with us, a key thing to note here, this is a value-added service for our customers that have SmartBiz solutions. So Jeremy and myself, it's a no-cost ad for you guys. We are an extension of our success team. We're really here to enable you, consult with you, and develop solutions that are specific for your business. So if you go to Calix Community, search up Sales Acceleration, you'll find a engagement guidance request in there. Otherwise, there's a QR code that you can snap a picture of here and take back on your smartphone and get signed up that way. So with that, Dustin, thank you for your kudos. He has been one of our great champions and participants. His organization is one of those success stories that's shared inside of this deck. But we will share this information out and the recording. We want to thank everybody for your time. We wish you a very, very successful close to your 2025, and we look forward to speaking with you here in 2026.
thank you so much.
Take care, everyone.